Hello, my name is Andrew Warner, Generosity Outreach Officer for the National Setting of the United Church of Christ and Director of Development for the Wisconsin Conference. And today I want to think with you about the story of the Israelites in the desert when they're complaining against Moses and Aaron about their hunger and their lack of food, and to see how this story might have some implications for us as we think about generosity and the spiritual practice of generosity in our churches and in our own lives. I really love this story and the richness of it. It's kind of a comical tale. But before we begin to look at the story itself, I just want to pause for a moment to just consider where we fit in the overarching story of the Exodus. You know, the Exodus tells the story of the journey of people who were held in bondage in Egypt and their escape and their long journey through the desert as they sought the promised land. They're on this massive 40-year journey from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the promised land. And I think it's good to wonder how it is that the journey of our own lives fits into this narrative of the Exodus. Are we on a journey from fear to freedom? On a journey from despair to hope? Or addiction to renewal? From hatred to compassion? What is the journey that we are on in our individual lives, in our congregations, in our society? And what does it feel like to be in this in-between space? Now let's turn to the complaint itself. The Israelites, as it says in verse 2, the whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." I can't be the only parent who hears this story and thinks of family vacations and trips. It certainly reminds me of times when my kids were younger and we'd go on a hiking trip and they would complain about how awful it was or what they needed or their hunger or whatnot. And yet I really want to spend some time to think about this particular complaint of the Israelites and in their memory back to the time that they were in slavery. What stands out to me as I hear this complaint is all the ways in which they've misremembered what happened. You see, they might have been beside the flesh pots in Egypt. They might have been there stirring the pot, braising the meat, sauteing the onions and garlic, and cooking up a storm. Do we really think they ate that food? No, we know what was happening for them in Egypt. The way in which Pharaoh was killing the firstborn in their families. The way in which they were so oppressed that their cries rang out to God in heaven. The way in which they were treated with the indignities and impossibilities and utter horror of slavery. So they long for the flesh pots of food they never ate. So what strikes me in this complaint is what the Israelites have forgotten. And it makes me wonder, what do we miss in our memories of our church, of our society, of our own lives? What do we misremember about our own normal before COVID? One of my favorite versions of this story is that told by Zola Neale Hurston in her book, Moses, Man of the Mountain. Now, she used the Exodus story as a way to explore the journey of African Americans from slavery to freedom, with a particular sensitivity to the question of how one could be free from the mentality of slavery. In her retelling, the people come to Moses grumbling, "If this God you done got us mixed up with had just to kill us, we sure wish he had have killed us down in Egypt on a full stomach. We don't care if they did work us some. We would much rather die tired than die hungry." When Hurston writes this way in Moses, Man of the Mountain, it really brings to the fore what's going on for the people in the desert. I mean, what has to happen? What kind of mental gymnastics have to happen for someone held in slavery to say, we don't care if they did work us some? Worston's Moses cuts to the issue. I had the idea all along that you came out here hunting freedom. I didn't know you were hunting a barbecue. Freedom looks like the biggest thing that God ever made to me, and being a little hungry for the sake of it ought not to stop you. I've been hungry a lot of times in places just like this, but I felt that getting what I went after was worth it, so I made myself satisfied. I found out want won't kill you half as quick as worry will. I love that line. Want won't kill you half as quick as worry will. How does that distinction between want and worry resonate in your setting? To me, this gets to the heart the ways in which our journey is parallel to that of the Israelites. We're on a journey from scarcity to abundance. Really, I think this comes out as we look at the miracles in the story. Now, to me, there are really kind of 2 or 3 key miracles that take place. And it's not just about the bread and the quail. It's really about something more. You see, to me, it's amazing the way in which God listens to the people. That had to be one of the miracles, that God listened to the people as they made their complaint. For the people stopped to think about it, that was far different than the way in which the Pharaoh reacted to their complaints. And God did not judge when they complained. That was the risk that they made when they made that complaint, that God could be like Pharaoh, that God could gather them together and smite them. And yet here they are, complaining to God in the desert, and God listens and doesn't judge. To me, there's something miraculous about that listening without judgment. What does that look like to practice in our congregations, that listening without judgment? How does that connect to generosity? And then, of course, there's the miracle that we mostly think about, that miraculous appearance of the quail and the manna, this food coming out of almost seemingly nowhere. Now, manna, one way to translate that word, or to really focus on what lies underneath it, is to really translate it as whatchamacallit. That's what manna kind of meant, whatchamacallit. Now, there's different theories as to what that manna might have been. Some people wonder if the manna might have been a kind of bug excrement that was a carbohydrate that could be eaten for nourishment. If someone was giving me bug excrement, I would hope they would call it manna and not what it was. Others think that this was pure miracle, that there were cupcakes raining down from heaven and the people could just collect them and eat them in the desert. If it was my choice of pastry, God would rain down macaron, but I guess if I was hungry, manna would do. Others think that there was simply bread that people had with them and that they were moved to share. Whatever we think of the source of this manna, I think what's key is that the miracle was a change in the perspective that people had, a change in the way in which they looked at what they were eating. Rabbi Irving Goldberg talks about how in Judaism, the bread of affliction and the bread of freedom are really the same kind of hard bread, and that what changes is the way in which it's seen. And so you can have the matzah of affliction or the matzah of freedom. It all depends on the condition and of what's going on internally as you look at it. And as I think of that move from scarcity to abundance, it is really that miracle of the change in our perception. To be, I've known people who are very wealthy, who have very much a scarcity mindset. And I've known others who live without the kind of financial resources that others take for granted. And yet they live a life of abundance. It comes down to that perspective of how do you see the bread you hold in your hands? Do you see it as the hard bread of affliction or as the as the bread of freedom. So how do we see this moment that we're living in our churches? Do we hold this moment as if it's one of affliction or one of freedom?